I'm Dr. Anne-Marie Belkansky, and today I really wanted to talk about the ego. Now, I would say a lot of the work that I do is probably working on the ego, but I feel like there's a lot of negativity towards the ego, and I wanted to just give my viewpoint on how I address the ego and how the ego works. Ego is separation, right? The ego is a sense of self, and a lot of the ego that people know it to be is usually protective. It can be a negative ego, but the way that I look at ego is that it's just an identity of self. It's a separation, naturally from the greatest of. If we can be living in the most perfect utopic world, we would all see that we're all united. We're all from the same thing. We're all from, one thing, and we're just mirroring reflections of one another. But no, we have separation, and our separation within our body creates an identity, a self. And we can also create separations inside within ourselves and create different parts or different egos within ourselves. And so that's why I really like the model of transactional analysis to understand what the ego is, because this is also a way that I help my clients or help work through healing the egos or these aspects or these archetypes or however you want to call them. I don't know how else to call them, but so let's talk about transactional analysis and what that even is. And so transactional analysis is a study that was really created in order to, well, it was mainly showing how people transact, like how people are interacting with one another in relationships. Well, that's how we find who we are, right? In relationships, that's how we learn about ourselves in comparison to someone else. And so in transactional analysis, they identified three main ego types. These egos are the adult, the inner child, which I'm sure the audience, most of you have already heard of, but then there's also the inner parent. Now, adult. So the adult ego really is more of you now. It's more present, tends to be more logical. It does come through as a voice and an identity of a separation of self. Adult is usually the ego that we nurture, especially if you've done like traditional therapy or done self-help work or whatever it is. We give a lot to the adult self. Resources, basically, is what I call it. Now, the other ego, let's start with inner child. Inner child is more the innocent, the young. It was a created ego throughout your childhood. So it's kind of like a frozen part that was frozen in time from your adult life, primarily below the age of 12 years old. And the reason why I say that is because we get a lot of programmings from the outside world between the age of 5 and 12 when the conscious mind is being created or the analytical mind is being created. Otherwise, we're just in a very open state, right? We're just a child, a kid being completely free. And the child just wants to feel good. It doesn't care about anything else. It just wants to feel good. That's kind of like its default. And so the child can split into two different ego types. Now, the inner child can either be free, which is ideal. We want to feel free. And everybody has an inner child even today, even right now as an adult. I don't care if you're 80, 90, 100, or even 55 or 40. You have an inner child. And that inner child is expressed in a very free, creative, artistic, all the things that you enjoyed and loved and you felt free as a child is who you are. But unfortunately, I would say there is a maladaptive ego, which is the adaptive part. So we have either free or we have adaptive inner child. Now, the adaptive inner child is basically what the word says. It's adapting. It's adapting to its environment. It wants to be seen, loved, cared for, and so it may change itself in order to do that. And so it doesn't feel free. It feels like it needs to adapt to the world around it. It may need to protect itself because it wants to feel safe inside. And so it adapts to the world around it. And an adaptive inner child, are usually the ones we need to work on. The adaptive inner child ego that is frozen in time from our past. And so that's two ways that the inner child ego can split. And then we have the inner parent that not a lot of people are talking about. However, all the inner parent is really that critical voice that we hear. It tends to be, because inner parent is really taken in from all of your authority figures as a child. It's kind of like the parts that you took in and said, okay, this is mine, when it's from the outside world. And so it wasn't really just the truest essence of who you are as an inner child. It was kind of like things you took out from the outside world that you thought would serve you. And so inner parent is doctors, teachers, priests, parents, anybody that was older or had authority over you as a child. Because inner parent, inner child egos are created from our young, childhood. And so the inner parent can split into two different ways. If you had a wonderful environment, upbringing, people around you, it's going to be very nurturing. It's going to be a nurturing inner parent. It's going to be supportive. It's going to encourage you. Versus being a critical inner parent. Now, the critical inner parent, if you're doing inner self work, is probably that's the one that it turned into, which is very critical on self. It usually comes through as you shouldn't do this, you should do that. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? So it's very hypercritical of you, and it comes through as a voice usually, right? Because again, these are egos. Separations of self that are just trying to figure out how to feel good at the end of the day. So when it comes to healing, I usually focus on adult to heal and to go back and forth. And so adult is really toggling between all of these parts that are separated. And when we do this, when you're really connecting with the body or with the feeling of that part, we're getting into the subconscious mind, or the where these egos are really held, if that makes sense. And so the adult is the one that I like to go back and forth between each other. And so this is how I like to see egos, because it really definitely translates into reparenting technique. And a reparenting is really giving yourself what it is that you needed from very, very early in life, and even growing up, giving yourself what it is that you needed throughout your life and upbringing. And when you do that, it really transforms the way you even see those experiences. Because at the end of the day, we want the inner child to be free, and we want the inner parent to be nurturing. And if you don't pick up on any of that, then that means that there's space for us to heal and to let go of that. Those things are the shadows, the darks that we want to transform to the light. Because everything's about duality. It's about separation. We have light, we have dark, we have positive, we have negative, we have good, we have bad. We have all these dualistic or polar parts that are separated. And so there's going to be separation within us until we heal and shine the light on the negatives. So we turn criticism into nurturing. We change adaptive into free. And so that's really just a healing technique. So I hope that this helps you in my explanation about egos and about really transactional analysis, and also helping you heal. And if you enjoyed this content and information like this, please feel free to let me know below, or subscribe, or just write me a comment, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much, and have a great day. Bye.